recognizes that the Lenore County Board of Education has established a quorum and calls for the January 10th, 2020 special call meeting to order. And before I get started, let me just acknowledge that Dr. Outlaw is not physically present with us tonight, but she is joining us remotely. Dr. Outlaw, can you hear?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Mr. Nick Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let us pray. May the words spoken in this room tonight be beneficial to the students, parents, staff, and administrators in our school system. And may we be led by the guiding principle to always base our decisions on the best interest of our young people. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
States of America,
and to the republic
to which it stands,
one nation, under God,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and
liberty and
justice
justice
for
for
all.
all.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Mr. Brent Williams to present the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's my honor and privilege tonight to present to you for your consideration and hopefully your approval of tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Is there a recommendation or motion pertaining to the agenda?
Move to approve.
Is that Mr. Smith? Motion by Mr. Smith. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Woods. So we have a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Woods to approve the board agenda as presented. Any discussion? Hearing none, Chair will call for the vote. All in favor of the motion as stated, please signify by raising your right hand. All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Excuse me, I got my, Dr. Outlaw.
Yes.
Could you hear the motion?
Yes.
Your vote?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Motion carries. Agenda is set for tonight. All right, we do have public comment section tonight. We have 3 people that have signed up, so I want to call your name if you would like to step up to the podium. First person who has signed up is Mr. Jonathan Britt. I'm sorry, Mr. Britt, before you start, we do have a 3-minute limit, so Mrs. Harrison is going to be our timekeeper tonight. So, thank you.
All right, I'm Jonathan Britt, parent of 2 LCPS students. We're obviously in the midst of another COVID wave. However, it's also clear that it's moving fast and is amounting to little more than a cold in almost every case. If parents see a cause for alarm and believe masks work, we can send our kids to school wearing one. This should remain the board's policy, if for no other reason, out of respect for parents' right to make this health decision for our children. You do not know the health needs of every child, and if masks are effective, then an at-risk child A wearing a mask does not need child B to also have one on in order to be protected. If masks are ineffective, then forcing masks back onto the LCPS population will again fail to control the next peak, just like forced masking failed to control the peaks last January and September. Requiring masks again will accomplish little more than to demoralize students and staff with another abrupt rule change and cause our children to fall further behind in their cognitive development and education. These issues are in addition to the direct negative health impacts of prolonged mask wearing. I hope that you will acknowledge that the movement of this now endemic virus cannot be dictated from this boardroom, and that students' health decisions are best made by their parents and guardians who truly understand their health risks and needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Britt. Next person that has signed up is Ms. Crystal Jones.
Thank you. First, I'd like to say thank you guys for allowing the mask to be optional this past month. The next day, when I went to drop my kids off at school and pick them back up, the smiles that I saw, not only in my kids' faces, the other kids' faces, the teachers' faces, it was amazing. It was amazing to actually see how happy these kids were, that the teachers could express to their children that they're happy to see them. That was amazing. So I wanted to say thank you for that. Also, along with that, I just wanted to point out a few facts about masks. The risk of serious consequences from COVID-19 is the same magnitude as the risk that they face for the flu, yet we don't mask for the flu. I wanted to share that data. Also, some regarding the masks. Since COVID emerged, there has yet to be a single study showing masks are effective in slowing the spread of COVID. However, there have been a lot of studies showing that the masks are ineffective in the study, in the spreading of COVID. Without clear probable evidence that masks curtail COVID, common sense suggests schools should err on the side of caution and minimize disruption to children's lives. These masks are very disruptive. I would like to point out too that it is even difficult for some members in here, board members, to talk with the mask on. I've seen plenty of times them being pulled down so that others can speak. I don't think that's fair of us to expect our children to have to do that day in and day out. And I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Jones. And the next person is Mr. Michael Thomas.
Good evening. Frankly, I'm not sure exactly what preceded this. I'm not sure exactly why we're here, except that I received a call a couple of nights ago that said that this session would be happening, and the reason was a heightened fear of COVID again, which I think we all suspected might be coming. Since you voted to make masks optional. Now, many in the community thought that as soon as that vote took place, we anticipated and expected that it wouldn't be more than a month before we would be standing here tonight. I would just simply tell you this. I can't add much to what the others two stated. They're true and they're facts. But we know that 2, maybe 3 of you board members have been persuaded to change your vote, along with lines of the others who have maintained and insisted all along that our kids and teachers and staff members be masked in school. So those are the ones I'm really speaking to here. I'm asking you to use some reason and some real intelligence and analyze what we're doing. What we're dealing with is nothing more than a cold. That's a fact. It's science. This strain of COVID, or whatever we want to call it, actually has a number assigned to it. And that number is the same number for a common cold. What we're dealing with is no different than what every single one of us have dealt with for years prior to 2020. Years. Every year. High flu season, low flu season. Kids out of school. Classes at 90 and 80% throughout the winter months. No different. Workplaces, parents out of work. That's what's been happening. It's no different than what we've been dealing with most of our lives. The difference is fear and a narrative and a desire, for whatever reason, to fall in line with party affiliation. And that's simply what we're dealing with right now, here, tonight, with our kids. So for those 2 or 3 of you that have been persuaded and told that we have a new strain, I would ask you to simply step back and look at the facts and use some reason and some common sense. This isn't a virus that's deadly. I don't wear a mask. I never wear a mask except for the few times I've been in here. I don't get sick. But that is one of the differences. Half the community is masked, and half of the community, their immune systems are compromised because they're putting these things on their faces and they're breathing in constantly. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. All right, we would like to thank the public for their time, interest, concerns, and comments pertaining to the Lenore County Public Schools system. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Harrison. We will now move to the action portion of the agenda. Chair recognizes Mr. Brent Williams for review of the Lenore County Board of Education face covering policy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. SB 654, the state law requires local boards of education to vote at least once a month on whether the face covering policy should be modified. As you know, in our last meeting, we did that. This meeting has been called tonight for further consideration of that. Synopsis of the current face mask policy is effective December 7th, 2021. Face masks are optional for students, staff. Face masks are still required on buses, for visitors to all schools, and for attendees at indoor sporting events. The board also set the following standards. The metrics are greater than 1% of the school population and community spread is higher than substantial, the board will revisit the policy. And those metrics have been exceeded, and at this point, subcommittee meeting was called after those metrics were exceeded on Friday, and some of you were present at that or are on that subcommittee meeting. This time I'll decrease and ask any board members who were part of the subcommittee, the board subcommittee, if they'd like to address that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Williams. Now, as Mr. Williams stated, we did reconvene the committee to look at our face covering policy. Again, there were 9 members of the committee, 3 board members, Mr. King, Mr. Smith, and myself, 5 administrators, including Mr. Williams, and the Lenore County Health Department Director, Ms. Pam Brown. The committee met for about an hour and a half and reviewed the metrics set by the board at the December 2021 meeting and reaffirmed at the January 2022 meeting and endorsed by our health director. The metrics are: if the school-based population COVID cases exceeds 1% of the school-based population and the community spread is higher than substantial, then the committee would review the metrics and the face covering policy. After a review of these metrics, in which the school-based population COVID cases exceeds 1% of the school-based population and the community spread is higher than substantial, as of today, the committee is recommending mandatory face coverings for all students, staff, and visitors while indoors at Lenore County Public School facilities effective Wednesday, January 12, 2022, with the stipulations that if the school-based COVID cases are less than 1% of the school-based population and the community spread is less than half for a period of 3 consecutive weeks, then the committee would reconvene and review the metrics and make a recommendation pertaining to the Lenore County Board of Education face covering. Now, with that being said, before we get started, so if you, I would just, before we get into the discussion, just like to say, if you have a point of clarification, if you're asking for a clarification of something, we can do that, okay? But if we're going to talk about the policy, we would need to get a motion and a second on the floor before we start the discussion. So if you just want a point of clarification from either anything I said or Mr. Williams said, or if either one of the 2 other board members that were on the committee would like to speak, and if you'd like to ask for a clarification of what they say. But if we're going to get into the meat of the agenda item, then we would need a motion and a second. Mr. King or Mr. Smith, either one of y'all like to make any comments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to thank Ms. Pam Brown for her attendance today, also our leadership team and the board members that were there as well. We had a very good, as Chairman Hill said, a very good hour and a half or more discussion concerning this matter. I gave a lot of opinions, as well as others in the room. I think everyone in the public and my fellow board members know where I stand on this subject. I did bring to the forefront, I guess, of our discussion that the virus that we're dealing with now, as mentioned by one of our speakers in comments, is not the same as the virus that we started with 2 years ago, is not the same as the Delta virus that we've dealt with for the past several months. When we were voting last time, we voted to go optional, and we really hadn't even got into the Omicron virus yet. And now we are into the Omicron virus with our numbers have risen, which I certainly expected them to do after the holiday season. But as mentioned also, I consider this a cold, I consider it a cold virus, nowhere near the impact that the Delta and the original cold viruses have or have had. We have a tremendous amount of folks in the community who basically have serious cold symptoms, the headaches, the cough, the sneezing, and that is what I consider with the Omicron. I'm hoping that we will be over this very quickly and our numbers will recede very quickly. So, I don't mind saying that as I've told and said in the committee, I will not support going back to mask. However, I do appreciate the committee being willing to review the metrics quickly. Basically, we as board members review them every week or every day, but we will be reviewing them on a much shorter basis than just our monthly meetings, as far as possibly making a decision to go back to optional if we deem to go mask tonight. So I just, like I said, I think most people know where I stand, but I do appreciate the committee being willing to discuss how to come back out of mandatory mask much quicker than last year when we were in mandatory for many months. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Smith?
Yeah. First of all, like Mr. King said, I appreciate everybody coming together today for the committee meeting. Again, as he said, I appreciate Ms. Pam Brown giving her time to come and all the board members, the three of us that came together and administrative staff to discuss the face mask policy and review the metrics. As of today, in our district, we had, at the time of the meeting, we had 157 positive cases in our school district, which exceeded our original metric of 94, and with the community spread being at high. So we definitely have met the metric and went above that metric. Where we do realize that issues relating to mask policies in public schools everywhere, they're complicated. People have a whole bunch of different opinions and their views about masks and the policies. But in November, we came together as a committee and we met, we talked about it, we set some metrics, we brought them back to the board voted at that time to go optional with those metrics in place, and knowing that if we met those metrics, that we will meet again and come back with another recommendation, which is what we're doing tonight. Well, at this time, we know the numbers are high in the community. I've heard people say, well, it's the same as a cold. What I would say to that is, tell the families of the people who have died from this Omicron, that's the same as a cold. I don't think we can treat it the same. Whereas I respect your opinion, I don't think we can treat this the same way. But we did what we said. We came back together, we discussed it, we looked at the matrix. The matrix are above what we said, that we would come back with the recommendation for the board. So I would just say that, again, I appreciate everybody coming together to discuss this, and I appreciate the members of the community who are willing to express their opinions. I don't take it lightly, but there's, like we said, there are opinions and we all have them. Some are just different than others, and we all should respect each other's opinions, even though they don't agree with our, we all may all not agree, but we should respect each other's opinions. Mr. Chairman, you're back.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anybody have any questions, either Mr. Williams or the three board members that were on, or points of clarification three members that were on the board, and on the committee. Okay, so before we can get into any discussion about the policy itself, then, is there a recommendation or motion pertaining to the Lenore County Board of Education face covering policy?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the motion.
Mr. Smith?
Okay. I move that we move back to require masks for all students, staffs, and visitors in all indoor facilities of North County Public Schools. We have 3 weeks of sustained metrics with a positive rate below 1% of students, staff, and below high in the community. Committee will reconvene to discuss the possibility of moving back to mask optional.
All right, Mr. Smith, is there a second? All right, we have a motion on the floor. We need a second to continue discussion.
Second.
All right, we got a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Anderson. So, Mr. Smith, let me see if I can paraphrase that, to require mandatory face coverings for all students, staff, and visitors while indoors at all Lenore County Public School facilities, and we'll make it effective January the 12th, 2022, with the stipulations that if the school-based COVID cases are less than 1% of the school-based population, and the community spread is less than high for a period of 3 consecutive weeks, then the committee would reconvene and review the metrics and make a recommendation pertaining to the Lenore County Board of Education face covering policy.
That's correct.
And we got a motion and we got a second. Is there any discussion? Anyone like to? Okay, no discussion? No discussion. Okay, so hearing none, chair will call for the vote. Let me make sure, does everybody understand what the motion is? Make sure that everybody understands. Dr. Outlaw, could you hear the motion?
Yes,
Okay, did you understand the motion?
yes,
Okay, just want to make sure you were able to hear us.
yes.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. All right, if there is no further discussion, then chair will call for the vote. All in favor of the motion as stated, please signify by raising your right hand. To Dr. Outlaw,
Yes,
you're a yes, okay? All opposed to the motion, like sign. 2. Okay, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson, you didn't vote.
That's correct.
Okay? All right, thank you, Mr. Anderson. Okay. The vote is 4 to 2. Motion carries.
Technically 5.
I'm sorry?
Technically 5.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, technically, yeah. So for those who don't know the Robert's Rules of Order, if you are present at a meeting and you do not vote, then your vote is counted as a yes. That's just, when we follow Robert's Rules of Order, and that's one of in one of our board policies. Okay, motion carries. All right, with no further business to come before this board, is there a recommendation or motion pertaining to adjournment?
Mr. Chair. I
Yes,
have-
Mr. Smith.
I have something to say before we adjourn.
Okay,
Okay. I just want to say that we want to solicit the community's help, especially in our basketball games, with adhering to the mask policy. We definitely want to continue to have games. We definitely want to continue to have everybody be able to come to the games, but we will solicit the community's help in, helping us with this mask policy inside the gym. We're in a closed area where a lot of people gathered together, and we just need to make sure that we are doing what we can to help, that we can continue all our sporting events on the inside. And again, thank you.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anybody else? All right, again, with no further business to come before the board, is there a recommendation or motion pertaining to adjournment?
So moved.
Motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Smith. All right, we have a motion by Mr. Anderson and a second by Mr. Smith. to adjourn the meeting. Any discussion? Hearing none, chair will call for the vote. All in favor of the motion as stated, please signify by raising your right hand. All opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Meeting is adjourned. Please stay safe. Oh, excuse me, Dr. Outlaw, I'm sorry.
She's gone.
Oh, no, I'm here, I'm here.
Well, she didn't vote, right? She voted. Okay. My apologies, Dr. Outlaw. Meeting is adjourned. Please stay safe.
Meeting adjourned. Bye.